1-866-823-1077 is our phone number here on Bulldog Live on the Pulse, 1077, 1071 in the Upper Valley at 94.3 and AM 1400. Everywhere else at WPTLFM.com. I am Bulldog Brian Tilton. Happy to chat with you. Keeping an eye on a lot of things happening around New Hampshire. It is a big day in the legislature as the House is debating a number of things. Well, joining us in studio right now is a gentleman who is watching quite a few things going on in the New Hampshire legislature, and it's Grant Bosse. He's from the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy, and good afternoon, Grant. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, Bulldog. Good to be back.
All right, so you've been over at the State House. You just came from there. What are they doing?
Well, they've been dealing with the reconsideration of the bathroom bill all morning, and they were still wrapping up debate on that when I left to come over here. So I assume they'll finish up with that and take a break for lunch, and then come back and start debating the state budget.
Yeah, the bathroom bill thing. I warned people a couple weeks ago when they thought that was dead because it was voted down by a relatively small vote difference, and it was voted down. But I knew right away that they were going to bring that back for
well, it was a very narrow vote, and it was very late in the day. A lot of people had left, and supporters of the bill felt that if the people who had left had been there, then it would have passed. So they brought up reconsideration. That passed, and then the motion to kill it again failed by 8 votes. So I assume the final vote tally will be somewhere around 8 to 10 votes that it'll pass by.
About that. Now, what about some of the other things going on? Did they do the seatbelt law yet?
No, that's later. The first 2 bills on the calendar are the state budget, HB 1 and HB 2.
Okay.
One of them is just the numbers. The other is changes in the law that can implement the spending. And it's about an $11.5 billion state budget for the 2 years. It's up, depending on how you count it, either single digits or 10%. Depending on how you count the federal stimulus money, whether that's free money or whether that's still spending. So, and the 2 budgets, the Democratic budget passed by the House Finance Committee and the Republican alternative that they're going to consider, actually aren't that far apart. It's about $265 million. It's a lot of money, but out of an $11.5 billion budget, one's 11.5, one's 11.25. They're both a lot of money.
Yeah.
And one would represent, a small increase in spending, one would represent a small decrease in spending. But they take very different paths to get there. The Republican budget spends less and has fewer tax increases. It does, however, have a lot more local pass-throughs, a lot of the local funding that the House Finance Committee couldn't find a way to fund. Revenue sharing under Chapter 31A, it's been 40 years this program's been in place to help fund local budgets. They basically took away local taxes in 1971 and replaced them with, among other things, the business profits tax. So part of the deal was, instead of these local taxes, you're going to get a piece of the business profits tax.
Right.
This would suspend that money for 2 years and keep it at the state level to balance the budget. Another area is building aid. Governor Lynch proposed borrowing the money. The House looked at it, said we can't afford any more borrowing, we're tapped out, we need this for things like bridges and courthouses. We can't borrow the money, and they scrapped it entirely. Well, nobody thinks that the state is going to scrap the building aid program. The Senate's going to restore the money. The House Finance Committee couldn't find a way to put in the $83 million, so they essentially said, well, the Senate, you figure it out. Right. And so the Republican budget restores that $83 million. And it does so largely through an across-the-board spending cut. They've identified some areas where they want to cut spending. They've identified some areas where they want to increase it. But largely, they've told all the cabinet departments in the state, if you haven't told us what your priorities are, you have to cut your spending by about 13.5% over the next 2 years. We're not going to force you to cut this program or that program. You're going to have less money, and when you run out, you run out.
Well,
and so
there it goes.
And Neil Kirk, when presenting this, we put this on our website at nhwatchdog.blogspot.com. Neil Kirk said essentially some departments like Nick Compass at HHS, Health and Human Services, came forward. They told us their priorities, and we tried to meet those priorities, given the limited means New Hampshire has in this economy. Other departments just came with a big laundry list of spending. They didn't say what was important and what was less important. So you guys figure it out. We're going to give you 13.5% less money. So those are the key differences. Revenue sharing with towns. There's $100 million that the governor's budget takes from a medical liability fund. That's going to face legal questions if it passes.
Mm-hmm.
The question is it actually public money? It's basically an insurance pool that doctors have been paying into. Well,
which almost nobody knows anything about.
No, in fact, members of the finance committee, when they found out about it, that they were going to balance the budget with $100 million, went, "This is great. You have any more of these?"
Yeah.
Because it's an excess of insurance funds. So if you get a refund from your insurance company because your premiums are more than needed to pay out claims, some insurance companies will send a refund back to their consumers. This is essentially a state-administered, not state-owned, but state-administered insurance fund that's got an extra $100 million. So instead of sending a refund back to doctors, the state wants to grab the money. The Republican budget says, we don't think that's a good idea, and if we thought it was a good idea, we'd get sued anyway. Let's not do it, and doesn't have that $100 million. And ultimately, everybody agrees that nobody likes this budget that much, so the Senate is going to do things to it.
Yeah.
So the question is, what form will the budget be when it heads over to the state Senate? And the deadline for action is tomorrow. So either today or tomorrow, they're going to pass something over to the state Senate.
Oh, really? And
Yeah.
so the Senate would have to act by the end of, by this deadline, which is...
Well, no, the House deadline is tomorrow.
Oh, the House deadline.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
okay.
and then the Senate has a couple of more months.
That's what I thought.
The ultimate deadline is June 30th. It's the end of the fiscal year,
Mhm.
and the state's authority to spend money just runs out.
Exactly. One of the things that have been written about, and I've talked about a lot here, is the proposed capital gains tax and the state tax. And I try to warn people because some in the media have been promoting this as just as a tax on the rich, and I've argued no, it's not.
It's a tax on risk takers. It's a tax on people who had good ideas. And the capital gains tax basically says if you succeed, we're going to take 5% off the top from your profits. And people who support it say, well, you've done well, you can afford it. But if the reward of succeeding is 5% less, then the incentive to take that risk and invest or locate a business in New Hampshire is 5% less.
Exactly.
Because the state doesn't give you, well, maybe they do nowadays. You don't get money when you fail,
Right.
except from the federal government, but the state takes money when you succeed. So it skews the risk reward. It prevents entrepreneurs from taking chances. Everybody, the point of starting a business is to be wildly successful, to make lots and lots of money. People don't start businesses just to squeak by. They want financial freedom. And a capital gains tax punishes those risk takers. And especially in a recession, in a time when you are doing everything you can to try to promote business activity, to get people to put money back into play in the economy instead of putting it under their mattress. A capital gains tax sends a very dangerous message to entrepreneurs.
Exactly. 1-866-823-1077. Grant Bosse joining us from the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. We'll talk about the launch of their new website, about nhwatchdog.blogspot.com. We'll tell you what's on there, and we'll continue the conversation with you here on Bulldog Live on the Pulse.
Bulldog